Hi there, I'm Joshua Finn from J&H Aerospace, and today we're going to talk about something that is done on a lot of outdoor models. This is a kind of an extreme case. This is a mid-1980s, roughly, F-1B Wakefield model. Very long fuselage. But the thing that this has in common with a lot of airplanes is a rolled tube fuselage. So it's a balsa tube, and you have to make the tube. Now, the upper section on this, because this is a Wakefield model, this is actually a double layer tube. The tail is single layer, and it's tapered, and in this case, you can break them apart. Now, I'm not going to show you how to break them apart because, quite frankly, I want nothing to do with that. But I do want to show you how to execute this process. So I'm going to show you my method, and you can go with it from there. Basically what I'm going to show you how to do is to create this type of fuselage, because I am building a 1958 George Benedek Wakefield for the new National Free Flight Society Vintage Wakefield event. And it happens, the reason I'm building this airplane in particular is that this is the probably the most influential FAI rubber model of the 20th century, at least in terms of outdoor flying, because every Wakefield designed after it, and a lot of American open class models and P-30s and so on, also were based off of its configuration. Now, they didn't use the double roll fuselage, or motor tube, I should say, but they do use the pylon, the hollow, constant diameter motor tube, and then a tapered tail boom. So I'm going to show you my method for doing this, and then you can kind of make your own inferences. So for my tail boom, we're going to set that aside here for a minute. We'll come back to it. That's the oven coming up to temperature, because it plays a role in this. So I have laser cut my motor stick blanks. You can cut they're just rectangles. That's all they are. And I've spliced them together because they're pretty wide. They're wider than 4 inches. So I think this one works out to just under 5 inches wide, and neither here nor there. The bottom line is, find some way to splice it together. I use CA, probably not the ultimate method, but it works for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this sheet of wood and we're going to roll it independently of the outer one. The outer one, I'm still making a decision on exactly how I want to do it. I've got a plan, so we'll show that part later. Due to the diameter of this, I did not have a waterproof tube that was the right diameter. This is roughly the right diameter. This is literally a roll that you would get, a cardboard tube that you would get monocoat on. And since it's cardboard, I have wrapped it in plastic wrap to keep the water off of it, because we've got to wet this guy down. I'm going to set this outer blank aside for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet this out, and then we'll come back. Alright, so here's the inner fuselage blank. Yep, it is the inner one. I cut it smaller. Wetted it out. Nothing special there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working this thing on here. This is where you pray that it doesn't split on you, because these things do occasionally do that. That's why you don't want to use C grain if you can avoid it. And some of this that I've spliced in is in fact C grain, which I hope that was just it rubbing against itself. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was my seam splitting where I glued it. Lovely. Thank goodness this is the inside. Oh yeah, she's splitting good. Lovely. Welcome to my world. Oh, fantastic. This is going about as poorly as I had imagined it would. Remember how I said this is my method? And choose wisely. So I've got that mostly adhering there. So now I'm going to start using packing tape. I don't like to use masking tape because masking tape, when you heat it, it bonds aggressively to the wood. Now, the wonderful thing, and I say that in the most sarcastic manner I can, about packing tape is it loses its stickiness when it's wet. But if you wrap it back on itself, you can get that. And so all I'm doing right now, actually all I'm doing right now is destroying my fuselage blank by splitting the splice line, which just contributes to how much of a mess this can be. And if you can't tell, I don't really care because the plane is going to fly just fine. So at this point, I'm just going to go around here and start wrapping this in. It's going very poorly. So what I'm doing here at this point, even though it has split there, what I can do is I can still have enough closing force with this tape that I can force it to the correct curvature. If you notice, I'm overlapping this wood. The reason I am doing that, and I'm also wrapping this very tightly as I can. This mandrel, like I said, is too small, so we are being creative with it. And what we're going to do is afterwards I'm going to fix that seam, and then I'm going to glue the second seam with this thing kind of loose on the tube, and then ideally I can roll the second one right over top of this. If I do everything perfectly, I can dope the second layer in place. And then this comes out looking like it wasn't made by a 2-year-old. No, instead it was made by an adult child.
And through this process, he's gonna find out how the flyers, you guys that are out there that used to do this, how that they did it.
No, I'm not. I'm going to just be mocked for how terrible of a job I'm doing. F1D guy tries to do Wakefield. I just want to point out the only other person I know of who flew both Wakefield and F1D was Jack McGillivray. I've at least gotten my longest indoor flight to be longer than his longest indoor flight. So, I think that's true. I don't think he ever did over 46. I could be wrong. I cheated, I used a bigger airplane. He could have too. At this point, it just becomes a way to waste lots and lots of packing tape. I think I need quite that much there. For those of you who are wondering, I have in fact made some very nice old tube fuselages for my outdoor models. So this one will end up looking very nice too. It's just that the road to get it there is paved with me splitting open balsa that, you know, wasn't wide enough, and a roll of packing tape that's done. Epic fail.
Don't worry, guys. He's gonna order me more.
She's mad at me because I've used up her packing tape. Alright, so there we have it. At this point, you can chuck it in the oven. I, however, am going to go get a second roll of tape, and I am going to wrap this guy right over this one, because I am truly, and I do mean truly, that impatient. Plus, I think it'll work. We're going to find out together. Alright, so got the second sheet wet. I'm forming it right over the top of the first one. Why? Because I can. Also because I'm going to use that as a means of cutting it down to size, because I am relatively certain that I computed the circumference incorrectly. I could be wrong about that. It may come out just right. We will find that out, like I said. One thing to bear in mind is that usually the wood shrinks in width across the sheet as you cook it. So that's something I usually do to factor in a little bit of extra. And that edge that I spliced in is harder than the rest, but regardless, no sea grain in this one, and that means it's not splitting open. Yay! This is how it's supposed to go, instead of how it, you know, actually went. And if you were worried about getting a perfectly round fuselage, don't watch my video. Just shut it off now, because I am not, in fact, worried about getting a perfectly round fuselage. And since I have set national records with beautiful, perfectly round fuselages, and not beautifully round, perfect fuselages, I get to say that. And this is the point where, instead of you watching me tape up the rest of this, because you get the picture now, you are going to see this coming out of the oven in 3, 2, 1, poof. There it is. So, the one thing you have to bear in mind is this tape will kind of tend to stick on here. So, may offer up a little bit of resistance peeling it off. Oh, like that. It's no biggie. If it's too much of a deal for you, I mean, use like acetone or something to pop it loose. But bottom line is, you can go down here, take a razor blade, and just hit up the whole thing all the way down. And I have a piece that my laser for some reason didn't cut. That's fun. I'll get that now. I will say, to those of you that are pondering how much this stuff is sticking to the tube, just imagine how much worse masking tape is, because it is so very much worse. And we'll come back once I get the rest of this off of. And there is the outer tube. Pretty stinking awesome. There you go. Hi. We'll go ahead and pop the other one out, and we'll come back after that. Okay, so we've got these guys out here, got them sliding over each other. I actually did cut some extra material out of them using a balsa stripper. Just run balsa stripper along the edge here because the outer tube was too large. I cut too much off. We'll deal with that later. But the main thing is, right now, we want to deal with gluing the seam on this inner one. So what we're going to do is we're just going to CA it and make sure, yeah, because there was an area where I was cutting on here and I cut through the plastic a little bit. Don't want to glue it to the cardboard underneath. Now, there are a variety of ways to do this. You get to see mine, which is not great, but we're gluing a seam, and y'all are watching this video. If you're watching this video, you really don't have enough to keep you busy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this in segments. I'm sure there are other better ways to do this, but this is similar to how I do F1D motor sticks. So all you're really trying to do is make sure you're pressing this all in here together real nice and tight. And so that's got that closed up. So the big thing is watch out. Now you've got accelerator here, so what you want to do is make sure that's the last part that you join together, because it's going to harden immediately, so you've got to get your fingers on it and get it stuck together. The spot that's not joining up real neatly there, so we're just gonna, there we go. Alright, I'll come back once this is done. Okay, so now that I've got the seam glued on this, what I'm gonna do, and this is specific to this aircraft since it's a double layer tube, I am going to coat this outer tube with Duco cement. And I don't want to get it all over my hands because it do not, unlike CA. CA is annoying on your hands. This stuff is super annoying on your hands. I don't know why, but it is. And I know because I've gotten a lot of it on my hands over the years making motor sticks for things. So what I'm going to do, you could thin this and brush it on. I'm going to do it this way because this is the way I want to do it. So what I'm doing, wrong glue. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this on here, and I'm then rubbing it in with a paper towel. And you want a fairly significant coat of this on here. We have the entire tube now coated with Duco cement. So I'm going to slide it back on the mandrel here. The reason we're doing that is because we're going to put a fair amount of pressure on this. So I'm going to slide the outer tube back over here. And then we've got to get acetone all the way down around all that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a piece of aluminum tubing here. Basically, we're going to send acetone dipping all over the place here. We're basically just bathing all of this in acetone in order to liquefy the glue. Press this all in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take masking tape here. I'm going to use masking tape for two reasons. One is since we're not heating it, it's not going to bond as strongly to the wood. The other is I've not tried acetone around packing tape before, but I know Scotch tape dissolves the tape itself, not the adhesive. The tape itself and the adhesive dissolve in the presence of acetone. And there are certain outcomes that, nope. Well, we can tolerate that. This is not one of them. And now I'm not holding a good hold on this. So just like before, we just keep repeating this all the way to the end. Now that we have the fuselage, or the motor tube set up all right, I did have a gap right here. I don't know how well that, yeah, you can see it right there. A gap on the outer, so I let in some 1/16 strip in there, tapered it at the end because it wasn't as gappy up here. I don't know why. Put that in with CA, sanded it down, everything's happy. I made a nose block, which I'm trying to keep in the same orientation. You'll understand why in a second. The Benedek plane has a nose skid, which mounts onto the bottom of the nose right here. It's intended to protect the propeller blades from getting scraped if you land on pavement. I guess that was a thing over there in the USSR back then, but whatever. I've sanded it so it mates on there real nice. Remember, this is a, I don't know if you can see real well, this is curved. So I'm going to show you how to do that. This one was a little finicky, so what I'm going to do is rather than doing it on this, I'm going to do it on the mandrel here. And then I can adjust things on the motor tube. Because what I'm going to do is show you how to put the pylon, set up the pylon to go on there. The most efficient way to set up your pylon is to build it up. So there'd be a former here, another one down, not at the bottom, but at the level where this would sit on the motor stick. You would have excess here that you would wrap around as sheet balsa. This one's just planked up of a layer of 1/16 with slots in the end for the wing pins, and then the outer, which is for, forms the bulk of it. But what we want to do is I've wrapped sandpaper around my mandrel, and now we just slide this guy back and forth until we get the desired profile. And this can take a few minutes. And one of the things you'll notice is I already had sanded this to the correct cross section. That is not necessary to do it in that order. You can do it in reverse order. You could sand this and then sand the profile. It's just what I felt like doing at the time. I've got quite a bit of material to go through here. Make sure you're holding this correctly, not tilting it one side or the other, because you want it to stand up straight up and down. Almost there. Got a lot of dust building up in here, so I can't tell how close I am to this. The reason I want to go all the way to the depth of that center core is because that gets me my 4 degrees incidence that the original drawings say the airplane was supposed to have. Almost there. Almost. Let's see. Nice and curved. And look at that. Does it rock back and forth noticeably? It sits beautifully. Look at that. Now we're not going to glue this on yet, because I'm going to seal this with dope, and I'm going to dope tissue on it in a spiral pattern all the way down. Now, the tapered tail boom is a slightly different matter because, well, it's tapered. And that does tend to make these a bit of a pain in the neck. Now, I have laser cut my tail boom blank, and that means I have gotten the curvature on the ends done correctly. If you cut this straight across, it's not going to be it's not going to give you the same length along all of that, because this is a conic section. Now, if you don't have a computer to design your tapered tail boom blank, and you simply know I want it to be X distance long, and I want this diameter at the front, this diameter at the back, that does not mean that you need to figure out what this curvature is. You can cheat. And the way that you can cheat is you can cut this end straight across, and you can exaggerate the curvature on this end. After you have completed the tail boom, that includes forming it and gluing the seam, then come back and you can sand the end, each end, to give you the correct end point. Like I said, I have modeling software that allows me to get around that. Now, the other thing is you need some sort of a tapered form. What I have here is something most of you will not have access to. This is an FAI F1C tail boom, an old generation one. So this is an aluminum tapered tail boom. Handy that I've got it, but the rest of you will have to use like a pool cue or something of that nature. Something that's tapered. Radio control sailplane tail booms also work and are not super expensive, so about $30 or so I think is a reasonable price for something that you can use to make several different setups for your tail booms. But the bottom line is this is not the correct taper even for the model I'm building, so we got to get creative. What I want is I want the proper curvature at the back. At the front, I'm not as worried. I can massage it out to a wider curvature. It's harder after the wood is dry to get to increase curvature than it is to decrease curvature. Because decreasing curvature, you don't run as much risk of splitting the wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to massage this piece of wood in, and by the way, this is A-grain wood, so it's fairly pliable. I say that, and that seam is just splitting right apart, just like it did on the motor stick. What a pile of garbage. But regardless, I've got it at the back, which is the part I really care about, except not far enough down. Right there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing I did on the motor stick. Motor stick. Yeah, motor tube. There's a difference. Which side the motor's on. The inside or the outside. And so as you're doing this, You're going to have to overlap it here. Those of you who who are cringing at how this results in not a perfectly round tail boom, just understand I ascribe to the George Perryman school of thought on this, which is, you know, really just build the airplane light and put it in a thermal. And you know, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Alright, I think you guys get the picture though. So, when we come back, this will be coming out of the oven. Not the oven. It'll be dry, because I can't fit this in the oven. Okay, we have the tail boom blank here. I have it temporarily taped shut at the back. This is, I fixed the split along the splice line, so don't worry about that too much. Now, have a nice mandrel here. I did not put any kind of shielding on this mandrel when I assembled, or when I put this boom on here. So we're going to do that now. And this is just parchment paper. You could use plastic wrap or what have you. I just don't want to get CA all over my mandrel here, which happens to be a, even if I don't ever use it, a very nice artifact of power free flight models, and I don't want to mess it up. So what I'm going to do, I've slipped this all over here. I'm going to pop tape loose back here. And we're going to start by gluing this seam at the back. And I'll have my CA accelerator handy. And so all I'm doing, I'm actually sliding this back to where it's a little bit loose, because right at the join it kind of wants to come apart a little bit. And I want that join, to the join line to be, perpendicular, so it's actually round back there. Now, how well I'm going to succeed in that, I don't know. There we go. And so at this point, we just work our way all the way along here. There are some spots where the curvature is not quite correct. You just kind of roll with them. Those of you that can get them perfect, more power to you. I will not feel at a... Oh, that was graceful. I will not feel at a competitive disadvantage, though, if I don't have mine perfectly round. just so you can kind of see what I'm doing is kind of pressing it flat right there on the seam. And hit it with the accelerator, leave some of my skin behind, which I will sand off later. It's easy enough to do. And then you just keep working your way along, press it down, and so on. Now that we have the fuselage, or sorry, tail boom finish, it looks like it's bigger at this end when you look at it this way, but it is in fact tapered that way. We need to find a way to get our tail to sit securely back here instead of this. Now, the plans for this airplane call for a platform to be cut in. So the way that we're going to do this is you need some sort of template to do that, or some guesswork, which works surprisingly well. But I modeled myself up a template, so I'm going to cheat. So I have folded that in half so I know where the center line is. I'm just going to line it up with the seam. And since I got my seam on actually quite straight, I don't normally do that on F1Ds. Normally it's like curved and crap and ugly. I'm just going to lay this on here and use it as a guide to cut in here. Come on, my razor blade is dull. Now, what I should have done is used a pen to mark this, but lacking one, and being stuck and kind of committed at this point. Now, I am cutting like this, not perpendicular to the tube. That's because I'm setting up a platform on this. So I want a flat surface there. Perfect. So now I have the beginnings of my platform. Before I proceed, hit it with some sandpaper, get it mostly smooth. You can see our tail fits on that right nice like. Now, I have already pre-cut some parts, because again, this build is actually a test case for a short kit. So that's why I have all the laser cut parts all ready to go on this instead of just building out of thin air in front of you. So I've got my front bulkhead because I don't want to leave this open because that destroys the strength of it when you leave it open. And so we glue that onto the front, like that. Now here's the part where it's real nice and exciting here. Next, I have decking that I have cut out here. My decking is a little, that's just right, perfect. So I'm going to glue it flat on top. You could, like that, you could inset it. I've done that before too. It's up to whatever you want to do. Back here, if your design flight loads are high enough that you're worried about one type of joint being stronger than the other, you may want to change wood sizes, quite frankly. That being said, don't change wood sizes, add extra beef back here just because, oh, I'm worried about whether that's strong enough. You need to actually determine, is it strong enough? Which may mean build it out and try it and see if it breaks. If it doesn't break, it was strong enough. The reason I say that is the loads on things like this are often much, much lower than you might think. Now, I've got a twist to my stab platform, and that is annoying, and I can't really get rid of it. So I'm going to show you what to do. And you're not going to like it. So my stab platform, I don't know if you can even see it, it twists like this coming towards the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to sand it flat. So now let's see. Oh yeah, perfect. All right, last thing is we're going to cap off the end. Now, why is there a hole in the end? Because the original called for a dethermalizer back there. I'm now finding out I screwed this up because I did intend to inset that platform in there. I have to redo my drawings. Oh well, that's okay. I'll just round it off and it'll be fine. Actually, wait a minute. Correct way is to set that down and stick a little bit of 1/16 fill in there. Come on, let go of me. And there you go, all closed up. Stab fits back here. You would have a snuffer tube right here, or you can close that, just leave it like that and run a line down inside straight up to a conventional timer. But there you have it. Your fin sits up on top like so. I may or may not show some footage of me doping this to seal it up, but you dope it, put tissue on it, and off you go. Butt join this to the back of the motor stick, fuselage tube, motor tube. There we go. But you may want to lay down some flat sand it. Disc sander would be great for that. So, some of you will want to figure out a way to do a removable tail boom. There are some sleeve methods you can use for that, or you can just literally butt glue it to the back of the airplane. And trust me, it's strong enough to do that. That joint's plenty strong to just glue it straight to the back of the motor tube. So anyway, there you have it. Okay, so I have things mocked up on here. So I've got the rudder tack glued up here, rubber banded the stab on, pylon is tack glued on. And so I'm trying to attach the tail boom correctly. I have the mandrel actually up inside here. And so what I'm trying to do is, and I'm actually going to use you guys to sight down there and make sure my stab isn't tilted. There we go. So I have contact on that. Yep. Not the greatest join, but the next thing is make sure it's straight in other ways, which it most certainly is not, because I moved it. Then there we go, all mounted up. Hi, I'm Josh Finn. This is Hope. We are J&H Aerospace.
If you like this video, hit the like button.
Also, how about subscribe to our channel and check out jhaerospace.com for new free flight products and all of the tooling that you'll need to build them.
Thanks for watching.